Okay, how we doing, folks? Rich Van Tassel here with you, giving you our game picks for now week 4 of the NFL season. And of course, as always, we are recording audio for Get Live Radio. Our first game, we have another London game. It is the New Orleans Saints against the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are listed as the home team. The Saints are 1-2. The Dolphins are still 1-1 because they were off week 1, so they will not have a bye week following this game. Injuries for the quote-unquote visiting Saints. Willie Snead, wide receiver. Terran Armstead, offensive tackle. Sterling Moore, cornerback. Zach Strief, offensive tackle, are all questionable. Ben Heaney, linebacker, is out. For the Miami Dolphins, Kenny Stills, wide receiver. Ray Malaluga, linebacker. Jakeem Grant, wide receiver, are questionable. Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle, is doubtful. And Eric Smith, an offensive tackle, is out. Eric Smith, though, is not one of the starting centers for the Miami Dolphins, so not really going to be an issue for Jay Cutler there as long as Laramie Tunsil and Jawan James are able to play the entire game. Should you have an injury to one of them, then you're really stretched thin at tackle. The New Orleans Saints, of course, we talked about their tackle situation. Armstead and Strief have both been out. They are both starters for the past 2 weeks. They are listed as questionable in this game. Of course, you have the cross-country flight, or the cross-continent flight, that is, over the Atlantic Ocean. Let's see how that affects these teams. I'm sure it will affect the Miami Dolphins coming back, not having a bye week, but that's a different discussion for next week. Jay Cutler has been pretty solid. He hasn't really turned the ball over. Of course, Miami had that very difficult and disappointing loss to the New York Jets. So let's see if they can get that bad taste out of their mouth against the New Orleans Saints team. Jay Cutler, as long as he can stay up in the pocket, should be able to get the ball downfield against the New Orleans Saints secondary, which still is not coming along as you would have hoped. The Saints were able to get the win in week 3 against the Carolina Panthers. That is a situation where it may have been just an 0-2 desperate team trying to get a victory, and they were able to do so. So in this case, though, I think the Miami Dolphins should be able to come away with the victory, assuming that Jay Cutler can and limit his turnovers, as it always comes down to with Jay Cutler. But Miami really needs this one, and I think they're going to get it, especially since they don't have the bye and they have a long season ahead of them. Really, you got to be able to find a way to get the victory in this London game, losing the bye week in week 1. So that is something to keep an eye on. I expect Cutler to make the plays. I expect Jay Ajayi to run the ball, and New Orleans to not have an answer for that, though they'll have a better answer against the Jay Ajayi than they will in the passing game against the Miami Dolphins. It's still a situation where they're not even going to slow Ajayi down that much, and Jay Cutler will be able to make the plays, and Miami comes away with the victory. It should be relatively high scoring. I like 30-27 in favor of the Miami Dolphins. Next game, 2 winless teams in the AFC North. The Cincinnati Bengals at 0-3, 0-1 on the road, travel to Cleveland and play the Browns, who are 0-3, 0-1 at home. Injuries for the visiting Bengals. Tyler Eifert, tight end. John Ross, wide receiver. Jordan Evans, linebacker, are out. Darren Smith, safety, is doubtful. Trey Hopkins, guard, questionable. For the Cleveland Browns, Sammy Coates, wide receiver. Randall Telfer, tight end. Danny Shelton, nose tackle. Myles Garrett, defensive end, are all questionable. Jamie Collins, senior, the linebacker, is out. Jamie Collins is a pass rushing linebacker, so you have some injuries to pass rushers in Myles Garrett and Jamie Collins, of course, being out. Garrett did not play last week. Let's see if he can get back in the lineup for this one. Hasn't really come along as much as you would have hoped early on in his season, but he is still a rookie. He was a top overall pick, but he's really got to start to show something towards the end of the year because Cleveland's got to salvage something from this season. DeShone Kizer has really come back down to earth, and that is a situation where he's turning the ball over a lot. Andy Dalton, on the other end, is also turning the ball over quite frequently as well, for lack of a better term. He has 4 interceptions to only 2 touchdowns. DeShone Kizer has 3 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, and following that week 1 against Pittsburgh, where it's pretty obvious they just didn't have film on him, and he was able to surprise them in that regard in a week 1. He's really been turning the ball over, so he has got to limit those turnovers moving forward. He has over 50 incompletions, 51 incompletions to be exact, on 108 passes, so he's really not playing well at all. We talked about that in the preview with the Cleveland Browns. I don't like putting a young quarterback, especially one who is pretty raw in Deshaun Kaiser with a team that really doesn't have much talent at all, and it's starting to show. Cincinnati has been able to find their offense a little bit, as they did last week against the Packers. They let that one go. Their offense was good in the first half, but then struggled in the second half, so are they going to be able to find it this week against the Cleveland Browns for the entire game? Danny Shelton as well at nose tackle for the Cleveland Browns, who's questionable, is one of the better nose tackles in the league. So they should be able to keep Andy Dalton upright. That offensive line has had its problems, but you do have the injuries to the pass rushers and the nose tackle for the Cleveland Browns. Cincinnati, even without some of their offensive weapons in John Ross and Tyler Eifert, should be able to come away with the victory. I like 20-17. Deshaun Kaiser, I feel, will make the mistakes. You still have a Cincinnati secondary with guys like Adam Jones who can find interceptions when they come, and just too many turnovers will allow Cincinnati to get out of there with the victory. 2017, the Cincinnati Bengals over the Cleveland Browns. A very interesting game here. The Buffalo Bills 2-1, 0-1 on the road, travel to Atlanta to play the Falcons, who are 3-0, 1-0 at home. The Falcons got that controversial win last week. Buffalo surprising 2-1. For the Bills, their injuries: Jarrell Worthy, defensive tackle; Shaq Lawson, defensive end, are questionable. Cordy Glennon, offensive tackle, is doubtful. For the Atlanta Falcons, all are out. Vic Beasley Jr., linebacker; Courtney Upshaw, defensive tackle; Terran Ward, running back; Ricardo Allen, safety; and Ryan Schrader, the offensive tackle. Schrader is going to be out for a long time. Buffalo was able to get the win last week. They really handled the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are a team we'd have to discuss, of course, more. They had that big win against the Cowboys, then they really struggled against the Bills. So where exactly is their offense? Was that a case where they just had the Cowboys, and the Cowboys weren't well prepared, as we saw in that game? And then Buffalo was more prepared and saw some things. We'll have to see. Certainly, Atlanta is a much more high-powered offense with a guy like Matt Ryan and the Julio Joneses downfield than the Denver Broncos, regardless of how Denver looked against the Cowboys. So that is something that's going to be curious in this game. Tre'Davious White, a lot is going to be placed on him. As we talked last week with the Buffalo Bills, finding a way to win a game against the Denver Broncos, a team, though, that they were much more evenly matched, even though I thought Denver was the better team. Certainly, I think Atlanta is a better team than the Denver Broncos in this situation, and Buffalo was playing at home. So, Buffalo, look, if they want to show that they're taking strides, I don't think it necessarily has to be a victory. Again, there are no moral victories. I'm not a moral victory type of person in the NFL. It's just a case where you want to show that you're making progress, because most teams in this situation going down to Atlanta will lose. We saw the Green Bay Packers lose. You could take the New England Patriots, who are probably one of the better teams, if not the best team in the league, and you would certainly not be out of bounds in any way to think Atlanta would win that game. So it's just a case of showing the development with the Buffalo Bills. I think they're going to have trouble shutting down the secondary, or shutting down the Atlanta Falcons with their secondary. Julio Jones is still yet to find the end zone, though he's putting up pretty good numbers. I expect him to find the end zone in this game. I expect that Atlanta is going to run the ball pretty well, because you have some injuries with the defensive tackle and Jarrell Worthy and Shaq Lawson, the defensive end, even though they're questionable. You do have Marcel Darius, who's been nursing some injuries as well, and Atlanta still, even without Ryan Schrader, has a solid offensive line. Vic Beasley Jr. not getting pressure for the Falcons on Tyrod Taylor should allow Buffalo to keep it close, but the Buffalo Bills don't really go downfield to begin with. They're not going to be able to keep up with the Atlanta Falcons for a little bit. I'd expect maybe they will. But at the end of the game, Atlanta's going to start to pull away. I like a 31-20 victory over the Buffalo Bills for the Atlanta Falcons. The Jacksonville Jaguars at 2-1, 1-0 on the road, travel to New York to play the Jets, who are 1-2, 1-0 at home. Jacksonville was the home team last week against the Baltimore Ravens in London. They are not getting a bye week, so let's keep an eye on that situation. They're only coming back to the East Coast, though, but certainly it's an issue where I don't like that. I don't like the London games to begin with, and I certainly don't like them when you don't have a bye week. Of course, with Miami Dolphins, we know it was the situation where they had a week off in week 1 because of the hurricane. However, in this case, Jacksonville did not have that situation. They were able to play, so they have a bye week in this situation. The injuries first for the Jaguars: Lorante McCray, linebacker; Jalen Strong, wide receiver, are out. For the New York Jets, Matt Forte, running back; Jordan Leggett, tight end, are out. Brandon Shell, offensive tackle, Josh Martin, linebacker, are doubtful, and Muhammad Wilkerson, the defensive end, is questionable. Blake Bortles was able to put up some big numbers last week. Of course, they won in week 1 when Bortles was pretty limited, so they took the ball out of his hands for the most part, and it paid off for the Jaguars in that game. And last week, they expected a lot out of him, and he was able to deliver. Of course, the game in between, he turned the ball over a lot, as we've seen Blake Bortles do in the past. So this is a situation where, against the Jets secondary, even though they added Morris Claiborne, who has not been very good, Morris Claiborne had his ups and downs in Dallas. But, last year, before he got hurt, he was playing pretty well, but hasn't really translated to the New York Jets. You might be putting Morris Claiborne in the bust category, who knows. Jamal Adams at safety, you have a good safety there. Blake Bortles could take advantage of this Jets secondary. Will the Jacksonville Jaguars let him, though? That's something to keep an eye on. Only 2 interceptions thus far this year, so let's see what happens with the game plan for the Jacksonville Jaguars. A chance for them at 2-1 to really make their season interesting in what is a very winnable AFC South, and they have to get this victory if they want to take any strides, at least to get to around 500 and possibly be in the playoffs. They really have a chance to springboard their season. It's a situation, of course, they're coming back from London, so the Jets may be able to stick around. They certainly surprised some people against the Miami Dolphins last week. Surprised me especially. Leonard Fournette still under 4 yards per carry. That Jets defensive line, which should be the strength of their team, is actually being much maligned here in the New York area. Let's see if they can step up. Muhammad Wilkerson is questionable, so if he plays, that will help them. But all in all, I expect Jacksonville to get the victory. I may be going against my better judgment in this one, going with the Jaguars team coming back from London and expecting them to walk over any team or just be able to beat any team is a stretch, even against the New York Jets. Jacksonville has not shown that respect, but I do think they're going to get this one. I like 23-16. They're able to keep the Jets out of the end zone and find a way to get the victory, and Blake Bortles limits his turnovers. The Detroit Lions, 2-1 off that tough loss against the Atlanta Falcons, travel to Minnesota, who is also 2-1. Lions 1-0 on the road, Minnesota 2-0 at home. Injuries for the visiting Lions. Dwayne Washington, running back, is out. The rest are questionable. Tavon Wilson, safety. Travis Swanson, center, who's actually quality center. Keep an eye on that. Don Juan Carey, safety, and Ezekiel Ansah, the defensive end. For the Minnesota Vikings, Sam Bradford is still listed as out. Rashad Hill, the offensive tackle, is questionable. Now, Case Keenum, bad in week 2, was spectacular last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think that was a fluke. I think that was an aberration. Case Keenum, we've seen enough to know that he does not have that ability to play that well. Maybe Tampa Bay was looking past him, not expecting him. Who knows what the situation was, but I'm not expecting it in this game. Matt Stafford, a little high with his incompletions, but he's shown that. He has 42 incompletions on 107 passes, but only 1 interception and 7 touchdowns. Of course, he's distributing the ball quite nicely. Golden Tate, though, is stepping up with what you need. Of course, I know I'm sounding like a broken record. It's the quantity over quality, but Golden Tate is delivering enough of that go-to guy. 21 receptions this far this year, but only 1 touchdown. Can Detroit shut down Dalvin Cook? A lot's going to be placed on Haloti Ngata. Ezekiel Ansah, if he goes, will have to get pressure. He's been pretty consistent this year, though his career has been up and down. I expect him to get it in this game, though Minnesota's offensive line is not terrible. Detroit distributes, controls the clock, and comes away with the victory on the road over the Minnesota Vikings in this one. Should be a close game, as the Detroit Lions seem to always play. I like 27-23, the Lions over the Minnesota Vikings. All right, we will be back in just a little bit, folks, and continue on with our game picks for Week 4 of the NFL season. And remember, we appreciate all subscriptions. Thank you.